Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Collier, and I'm here with my co-host, Andy Peliquin.
Hey guys, thanks so much for being here. Today's episode is brought to you by Cry Havoc, a Jack Frey novel by Mike Morris. For 700 years, the warrior priests known as the Black Dogs have sacrificed their lives to keep the island nation of Abios safe from the flesh-eating Nostros, while the rest of the world fell under the demon savagery. However, an armada now stands poised to invade mankind's last bastion. Child thief Jack Frey is saved from the gallows and joins the mysterious and the blade. Jack finds himself on the front line of a centuries-old war. Across the Angel Sea, Lyd is fighting for her life. As a slave of the Nostros, she knows death can strike at any time, either at the hands of her masters or her fellow humans. Little do they know, mankind's fate lies in both their hands. Action-packed from beginning to end, fans of Peter V. Brett and Brent Weeks will love Cry Havoc. Cry Havoc by Mike Morris. Read for free right now on Amazon Kindle Unlimited and find out more about the author at MikeMorrisAuthor.com. That's MikeMorrisAuthor.com. When the demons come, you either fight or die.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that, Andy.
Sounds cool.
Yes, yeah. And so we are here today with A.F. Stewart, and we're going to be calling her Anita. And she is the author of Ghosts of the Sea Moon. And before the podcast, we actually had a really cool conversation going. We were talking about ghost stories and mythology and stuff like that. All of these are super. I think all fantasy authors love a good ghost story, a good mythology story, basically anything like that. And apparently, Anita is an expert on it. No pressure, Anita.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I do love mythology, and it ends up in most of my books, if not all of my books, in some form or another, I think, and folklore too.
And so, you're saying right now you prefer Celtic and Welsh mythology right now. That's what you.
Well, that's my go-to mythology when I'm writing. I mean, the current book, Ghosts of the Sea Moon, it's inspired by Greek mythology, and the gods in the book are sort of loosely based on Greek mythology. But I did throw a little bit of Celtic in there with the magic system. And there's a little bit of Norse in there too, because one of the sailors is sort of my my token Viking.
And so, for somebody who's ignorant in Celtic mythology, when I think Celtic mythology, I think of fairies. That was the big thing when I visited Ireland. They were all about the fairies and all about the leprechauns. I don't know if that has anything to do with Celtic mythology, though.
Yeah, well, fairies are sort of derived from the Celtic gods, the Sidhe, which is spelled Sidhe. So yeah, I mean, fairies are based on Celtic mythology, especially Scottish mythology. They're big in Scottish folklore, fairies. But I mean, there's a lot of, like, the Irish have their own gods, like the Sidhe, and that's the Morrigan is the war god, and she is a great figure. She's like this great warrior with crows and ravens, and just fierce and bloody and battle and all sorts of things. She's my favorite god in Celtic mythology. And they've got like Bridget is Beltane Mayday. That's where that tradition comes from. Is from that goddess and the spring fertility sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Halloween is also Celtic origin with Samhain.
Is it?
Yeah.
The holiday Halloween.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some Christian stuff that got mixed in with it, when the dates. But I mean, basically, the Halloween's based on Samhain, which is the Celtic day, more or less the Celtic Day of the Dead, where the dead come back and kind of roam the earth for the night.
Is that why we wear masks, to scare them away or something?
Yeah, well, that actually is one of the reasons why you wear masks. It's to hide from the spirits, right? If you wear a mask or something to pretend to be the spirits. And they also lit bonfires, and it was also like the passing of fall into winter as well. You'd light the bonfire, and it would be sort of like the like the hearth fire. They take the fire sticks from the fire, and they light the hearth with it.
Already I'm seeing, like, it seems like all mythology was created out of either boredom or fear. So
Actually, a
I think
lot of it is fear based.
it's fear-based. Okay.
Especially when you go into the folklore aspect of it. That a lot of that is it's basically warnings, like don't go in the woods because you might not come out, sort of stuff.
I just watched that movie. What's it called? The Village.
Yeah,
where they can't go into the woods.
I like that movie, for the record.
I
think
actually people don't
I think
like
it was
that
kind
movie.
of unfairly disparaged. I think the marketing of the movie was wrong. Because they sort of build it as a horror movie, and it's not really.
I liked it.
Yeah.
What is it? M. Night Shyamalan. M. Night. I always say midnight. M. Night Shyamalan. I think people are either gonna love or hate his movies. Anyway, so Andy knows I'm Mr. Tangent. I'll just go off on any topic we talk about. So Anita, could you please tell us a little bit about your book? First of all, I love the book cover. It definitely looks like you.
There's the book cover if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah, please. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, basically, the book came about because I wrote this little flash fiction story for a contest based on a picture, which was it was a lovely picture, blue, with a moon and a ship kind of sailing towards this great big moon. And so I looked at the picture and I thought, that looks kind of like the ghost stories, the ghost ships, the Flying Dutchman sort of thing, right?
The Flying Dutchman.
Yeah, that's the story of the ship that's around Cape Horn, I think it is. It went down in a storm, and then now it sails around Cape Horn trying to find the home port. Is basically the story.
Mm-hmm.
And but that intrigue, I've always liked the idea of the ghost ship, and then I thought, well, ghost ships are nice, but what's it going to do? And I thought, well, what if it was like the Greek myth where they were ferrying the dead?
Ooh, like Charon was his name?
Yeah. And then so I thought, well, that would make a nice little story. So basically, the original story was this sailor on the ship getting sailed to the afterworld or the afterlife. That was just, I've actually included the original flash fiction in the book too, so if people can see what the original was. And so, but I like the little flash fiction, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just flesh it out a little bit, make a short story. So I started writing the short story. The short story turned into a novella. The novella turned into a novel, and the novel turned into a series. And now the series has turned into several series.
I love when that happens.
Yeah, so
everything just spirals into new things.
Yeah, so basically the novel's set in this mythological world of the Outer Islands and the Seven Kingdoms. Now, the Seven Kingdoms doesn't figure much in the first trilogy. It's going to be part of the second one. Anyways, the book has this magic ship, the Celestial Jewel, and they basically...
It's an awesome name, by the way.
Yeah. Well, actually, when it was kind of just a random name I've got, but actually as I got into the story and fleshed it all out, the Celestial Jewel actually is very appropriate for the entire trilogy. And so anyway, basically the captain of the ship and his crew, they sail from getting collecting souls that have stayed in the real world instead of passing to the afterworld, and they help them pass on. And then there's also sea monsters and a crazy moon goddess who's trying to destroy the world. So
definitely seems like there's a lot of mythology in there. So Andy, I have to ask, since you're from Japan, do you know anything about Japanese mythology?
I did learn a little bit of Japanese mythology, but it's been 15, 16 years since I've studied any Japanese mythology. Like I've read any books on Japan and stuff. So most of it slipped my mind. I know that if I went back and read it, I would remember a lot of the things. But
Yeah.
it's been a long time. Most of the mythology that I read, like in depth, was Viking, Greek, Roman. I've done a little bit of research into Native American mythology, Mexican mythology. That's a fun one to play with. Some Indian mythology. I wrote actually a script for a video based on Garuda, one of the minor characters in the Indian pantheon. But yeah, it's been a while since I've gone back to Japanese mythology.
Yeah, well, I know a little bit about Japanese mythology. I know that ghosts figure heavily in Japanese mythology as well as demons. And they do have, like, the Shinto religion has its own pantheon of gods. I know that. But that's about, I think, about as far as I go with Japanese mythology.
When I think Japanese mythology, I think of the reason why they say moshi moshi when they answer the phone, because they're trying to trick the fox on the other end. And I think the fox is the Japanese animal for like trickery.
Yeah, that's Kasune.
Kasune?
Yeah.
Kitsune.
Kasune.
He pronounces it better than I do.
He is from the land of the rising sun.
That's a shapeshifter character. It's a fox, but the fox can shapeshift into human form as well.
And he tricks. So, is that mythology though, or is that a folktale?
It's kind of half and half, I think. Because I mean, folklore. A lot of folklore actually kind of originated in mythology and kind of got downgraded.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think Kasune is part of Shinto, the Shinto religion, or however you pronounce it, and I know that it's kind of a trickster character, like Loki and Coyote in the North American.
Don't even bring up Loki right now after the Avengers. My God.
Don't mention the Avengers. I haven't seen it yet. I have not seen it.
I promise I won't tell you anything. I won't. Now you have to do my bidding or else I'll ruin your day. So when I visited Ireland, I was shocked as to how strong their folktales were in their lives growing up. And my mom and we went to this little dinner, and it was a folktale thing. And the guy who's telling the stories had his son there, and he was like 5 or 6. And he was telling the story that they used to scare children to go to bed, and something about the fairies will take them off. And this kid was so terrified, he started crying just by hearing this story, and ran off. It was this guy's son, this Irish guy's son, and he ran off. And it's so cool that they actually still use these folk tales to keep their kids in line. We have the boogeyman. I think theirs was like the fairies. Also, it like taught the kids not to go off with strangers, not to listen to strangers, not to go off into the forest by themselves because the fairies will take them off. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. I don't feel like I grew up with a lot of that stuff. And I wonder if that's because America is like a melange of different stuff, different cultures, and it just depends. I grew up being afraid of the paddle, the magical paddle. So, here's an interesting question for you, Anita. Are there, and then we actually haven't really gotten to the topic, which I'll transition over to. It does have to do with mythology. Anita, are there any Canadian folk tales?
Yeah, I mean,
because Anita's in Canada. Anita's in Canada.
You've got like the local
the golem, like Smeagol?
No, the local.
Oh, the local
folklore. Like every town has some kind of local ghost story, practically. But you also have some native Canadian things like the Wendigo and stuff like that. And you've got a lot of native Canadian folk tales. Like the Mi'kmaq have their tales, like Glooskap and all sorts of stories like that. And so you've got a lot of that in Canada as well.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting mythological creatures in the what are they called, the First Nation mythology. You know,
Yeah.
this sounds crazy, but Marvel Comics actually has done a lot of really interesting stuff with mythology. Like they had
Yeah.
one where all of the different pantheons from all of the different regions of the world, especially the ancient regions, the Egyptian, the Japanese, the First Nations, all of that, all these pantheons came together to wage war on the god killer or something like that. But it was a really interesting look at a lot of the different aspects of the mythology from around the world. And specifically for Canada, they have this team Alpha Flight.
Yeah,
Which is
I used to read that comic.
It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun, Canadian superheroes, including Wolverine has his turn in Alpha Flight every now and again. But they have a lot of stuff there about the different First Nations mythology, and there's some really interesting characters there. I think is it the Firebird or something? That's originated there or something like that. There was
Yeah. I think there's something like that. I can't remember exactly what, but yeah. But I wrote a story about the Wendigo, which was interesting, and I studied on that one. That's an interesting tale, all about cannibalism.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, you'll be surprised how much cannibalism turns up in mythology and folklore. I tell you.
Anita, I just have to say this. You don't look like the kind of person that'd be interested in so much bloody stuff, but you really, like, anytime we bring up mythology, you're just like, oh, and then there's this this person who got her head chopped off. It's like
I write horror, okay? I mean, it's kind of my bread and butter.
You do? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I write fantasy books, but I also write horror. So yeah, it's kind of my bread and butter, all the dark stuff.
Oh, cool. I'm seeing that now. Guys, we have a horror author on the Fantasy Fiends podcast. That's awesome. I'm also, Andy and I, we've actually talked to people who actually read in a different genre than they write in. And I mostly read horror and sci-fi. So before I go off on another one of my famous tangents, let's get to the topic, which is about mythology. We are going to be talking about why mythology came about, right?
Yeah, the origin of it, and
the origin.
What I love about this topic is that it's sort of the origin story of religion as well, because for a lot of these cultures, the Egyptian culture, the Viking culture, the Greeks, the Romans, Native Americans, Africans, all of these people, the mythology was really closely linked to their religion, and so the origin of mythology is essentially the origin of religion. And what's so cool about it is that it almost explains itself. Like, what is Odin the god of in Norse mythology? Anybody? Or
wait,
Thor?
You broke up there. What was your question?
The origin of mythology kind of explains itself in many ways. Take for Thor, for example. Everybody knows that Thor is the god of thunder, right?
Yes.
And as I think I've said before on the podcast, people need an explanation as to why. Thunder is this deific, terrifying force of nature that ancient peoples didn't understand. So of course there would be a god of thunder, or Loki, the trickster god, the one who does well. If Loki's bringing all this suffering on the gods, of course Loki's also doing these bad things to us. It's it's not bad luck or fate or destiny or chance or just chaos, but
that brings up an interesting point on the trickster gods. Is that they're not all bad. That's what I like. Because, I mean, they often do good as well. It's like they're kind of an excuse sometimes, I think. They're the excuse humans had for why things happened or manipulation or stuff like that, too.
Because that's exactly my point about mythology. Mythology is basically anthropomorphizing things that happen or forces of nature or things that humans didn't understand and saying, okay, so this is why it happened. It's not that lightning, struck randomly because of, protons and electrons and neutrons and clouds and electricity in the ground. It's this god who's angry at me because I didn't sacrifice my goat to him. It's quantifying something that's incomprehensible for a primitive or ancient mind.
So,
Yeah.
What about this? Would the government of Greece, create a story using mythology to keep people in line? Does anybody know anything about that? Ruling through fear, through stories.
Well, yeah, I mean that's possible, and I mean it also goes to talk about like the priests and stuff. They would use the gods to keep in power, to control the populace as well. I mean, that's just human nature. Because I mean, and you if something happened like something like some great catastrophe, I mean, the king doesn't want to be responsible for it, so the gods did it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I found this page that says myth arises as the result of a need. Usually the need to explain something or to blame someone or to quantify something,
Yeah.
Using your context of, say, a king or a government using mythology, absolutely, it could be the case. But often they will take existing mythology because mythology existed before structured society. Basically, for as long as mankind has existed, there has been a need to understand things that are incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And so the easiest way to do it was just to make up a story, and which sprang into mythology, which existed long before republics, democracies, any of these things.
It's also why mythology is adapted over the years too, because governments change, priests change, conquered countries gets conquered, whatever, and the mythology twists and adapts, and things come in, things get like the Celtic mythology. They were, and the Romans too. They were great thieves of other people's culture. I mean, the Romans were very what's the word? Creative. The Romans were very creative about stealing it. They just took the Greeks, changed the names, and basically kept everything else.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah. The Celtic culture, though, however, they took bits and pieces from all these things, and then they rearranged them and just kind of adapted them into their own culture, which is interesting because you can see bits of it. Because like you can see that the Grimm's fairy tale Six Swans and the Children of Lear, they're basically the same story. I mean, there's a few differences in the ending, but they're basically a stepmother gets mad at her stepkids, changes them into swans.
And that's actually something really cool about mythology is that there is a lot of commonality between them. I mean, you've got the creation myth, you've got the same family hierarchical structure, you've got a lot of gods with similar power sets. Like there is something called comparative mythology, which is basically a study, like it's basically people who dedicate their lives to studying the similarities and differences between mythologies to see if there was what's called a proto mythology, like the original mythology that people based it on, sort of like how you said the Romans took it from the Greeks. Is there an original mythology that everybody took it from? And so like people who believe in the Bible, they will tell you that everything originated from the Tower of Babel because that's when God spread mankind. That was the world's big diaspora. But there's no scientific proof for it, or maybe there is. So this is what these people that do. They say, okay, is there an origin? Because if the Tower of Babel actually happened, it was all these people together. That would have been the perfect place for a proto mythology to originate, and then ultimately it was dispersed around the world. And so all these people created their own variations according to their society, but also their location.
Yeah, I mean, an original mythology, like you said, a proto mythology is plausible because, I mean, but it's also equally plausible that human nature is just so similar that people came up with the same ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that this comparative mythology field is basically, there's two camps. There's the ones that say there's a lot of similarities and then there's a lot of differences. And so like the leading thing is that all of these people have a lot of human elements in common, like you say, but the mythologies were all created independent and separate of each other. And there's more of those people than believe that there is this one proto mythology that spawned all the rest.
So we have the Bible and we have the Torah, and then there's another one. I can't think of it. You know what? Okay, so the reason why I'm asking, because there's a funny joke that I know. Well, that my brother, we were walking my dog, and he was like, "So have you read the Desert Trilogy in a while?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, what are we talking about? The Desert Trilogy? I don't know that one." He's like, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Torah. Because he always gets my goats. He knows I'm a Christian. And he's like the Desert Trilogy, like their fiction. Y'all aren't laughing. I'm laughing at my own joke. The reason why that joke came to me was, Andy, we were talking about mythology, and I knew you were going to bring up the Bible. But I want to. So Anita, we were talking about how the priest, the priests would use religion to keep people in fear, and that happened a lot in Catholicism, which kind of, I grew up Catholic. And anyway, I'm getting us off topic. I apologize.
Well, reining it back in a little bit, sort of taking off what you said. It's interesting that, like we talked about this in the religion podcast, but the same for mythology. The mythology shaped the society, and then the society shaped the mythology.
The mythology, yeah.
Like human nature, they created these characters, these stories, but then as their society was shaped by them, like Anita said, the stories adapted. And then so with each new evolution, both of society and the religion/mythology, things have changed, which is why today's let's say mythologies, or their the religious belief systems, are very different than the ones that were created, say, 1,000 years ago, because the needs of the people and the society of those who create the mythologies are very different.
Now, do you think mythologies were created by just people just telling stories that just got out of hand, and then somebody wrote them down?
Well, actually, I would say that the first mythologies were not written down, but they were actually oral, like passed from generation to generation. And like Annie said, it's more of people trying to explain why the sun comes up every morning, or like thunder and lightning. But it's also a lot of the early mythologies, I mean, they're very animal and elemental based. So I mean, they're just people trying to understand the world they're in, I would think. At least that's my.
It's actually, sorry, just literally what you were just saying. There's a Scottish philosopher who said that humans need the idea of cause and effect. There has to be this causal relationship in the world for us to understand things, or we would have no way of making sense of the world. The problem is that we see all of these things, happening. There's no link between them, and there's often no way for us to rationalize the link between them. So this instinct that we have in our brain to explain why is why mythology originated in so many societies, is because we needed this cause and effect relationship to be clear for us to make any sort of sense of the chaotic world around us.
Yeah. And human brains are wired to see patterns and think in patterns as well. So you can connect things that are not necessarily connected in your head, and instant mythology.
Yeah.
So I have a question for both of you. I usually do this on podcasts that I'm actually learning a ton about, which is why I love doing this podcast. But why don't people, and there are people I know, because I've heard of them, that why don't we have a huge following of this mythology, of people who actually believe in Greek mythology still? And, I don't know what they would do, perform sacrifices to Zeus or whatever. Why don't we have that anymore? Did we ever figure out, hey, this is fake, the Bible's real?
It's science. If you look at all of the gods, the god of thunder, right? Thunder has now been explained scientifically. The god of fertility, or goddess of fertility. Fertility is now understood in so many ways. The god of conscious thought, the god of fire. All of these things have been explained by science. So now humans no longer have a need to rationalize these things through mythology, because we understand them through simple facts, things that we accept in our day-to-day life.
Don't you think we could combat that, or we, like I'm part of this movement, don't you think people could combat that with, yeah, well, that's fine, we know how fertility happens, but it is this god that puts it into motion. The Mount Olympus isn't a real mountain, guys. It's just within us. The mountain has always been within us. And then they could continue believing mythology in that way, believing that these gods created these processes. I don't know. It's just an idea.
I feel like it's kind of like flat earthers. People who may have all of this information to the contrary, but they are so set in their specific belief system that they won't consider anything else. Now, flat earthers may be very intelligent, except for in that one thing, or they may be total idiots. But there is, there's probably the whole big range of them.
Or they could be idiots.
I'm sure there are people who are pretty stupid and who happen to believe in flat Earth, and then there are people who are highly intelligent who happen to believe in the flat Earth. So, but there is all of this scientific proof to explain all of the things that we previously deified because they were these terrifyingly large, earth-shattering, consequential, things that we couldn't understand. Now we do understand them. So the need for mythology has shifted. We don't need that sort of thing anymore.
Yeah, and science has taken away a lot of the fear, which is what kind of underlies a lot of the mythology. Because, I mean, if you don't have to believe in vengeful gods raining down thunder, I mean, why would you?
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. I see, man, y'all are so smart. I'm not being weird or anything. You guys are really, wow, that was good. That was good. Y'all totally answered my question. And I'm going to bring another funny story up because we talked about flat Earth. Take me a second. I was in 4th grade and I had this huge crush on this girl. God, I just thought she was this angel. I wanted to be with her. I was a player when I was a kid. I always liked girls. And I was like, God, A, or my brother's name A, just the letter A. I was like, hey, come check this girl out. Introduce me to her. And we're talking, we're getting along, right? Me and this girl. Her name was Macy. And she asked me like what I wanted to be. And I wanted to be a firefighter at that time. I'm not a firefighter. And I was like, I want to be a firefighter. And then she asked my brother, what do you want to be when you grow up? My brother's like, oh, I want to dig up fossils. I want to be a paleontologist, because I love dinosaurs. And she goes, dinosaurs aren't real. That never happened. That's fake. And seriously, there was this awkward pause for like 20 seconds. And he just goes, what's wrong with you? And she started crying and ran away. This was in one of our like after school programs. Seriously, my brother was like, what, 8? He was like, what's wrong with you? And it reminds me of you, Andy. Just like they could just be idiots.
Thank you. Basically, just to sum up myth, there's this document or this article that says myth functions as long as both the need continues to exist and myth continues to fulfill it at least as well as any competitor. So if we didn't have enough science to say lightning is generated by electricity doing a specific thing, myth would work. But the word myth, mythos, is it's a Greek word which means saying, story, fiction. The opposite is logos, the word that validity or truth can be argued and demonstrated. So basically, myth is a story or a fiction, and the opposite is fact, demonstratable, arguable, concrete fact.
So basically what we've been talking about, right? Yeah. So another question, another really cool question. How and why should fantasy authors use mythology for writing their novels? Has it been overdone? Has it been underdone? No, of course you're going to say, Anita. Actually,
I hope not. But I mean, there are so many different myths out there, so many different types of stories and folklore. And I mean, you go on Twitter on Thursdays to the Folklore Thursday hashtag, and you can see all sorts of things. I mean, I find new folklore stuff over there every week. It's fascinating. So, I mean, and they're all just stories waiting to be told by fantasy authors.
I feel like Greek mythology-based fantasy was extremely popular when that one book, The Lightning Thief, came out, and I feel like we just had this onslaught of myth books, and then it's
young adult myth-based books.
Yeah. So you don't think it transferred over to adult?
There haven't been that many.
I haven't seen that many.
There haven't been that many like actual like Percy Jackson, where basically bastardizing Greek or Viking or Roman mythology in the context of, say, a modern society or a modern world. There are a lot of fantasy novels that do take the pages out of the book of mythology. For example, gods with specific aspects and purposes and abilities. That's classic Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Norse mythology. You know, you've got the god of thunder who is not the god of bravery. There are these two gods with very different things. And I know that's something that a lot of fantasy stories have. My own stories have 13 gods, each with their own unique aspects and personalities and powers. You've got, I'm willing to say that 90% of fantasy stories that deal with gods in this way have that basis in mythology, where there is sort of this anthropomorphization of a specific ability, like Thor, the god of thunder. It's not Thor, a god who happens to use thunder. He is the god of thunder. Like, it is this personification of thunder. His temperament is thunderous. He's got the booming voice. He's got
I know what you're talking about now.
You know, he's got that
Yes.
that you know, hair trigger temper. He's got that violence and power of mythology, of you know, thunder. This was this anthropomorphization of this force of nature, and that's classic mythology, and that's something that exists in a lot of fantasy novels today.
I see that a lot in anime too. Like, they have a character just for one single emotion. Like, that's the angry guy. He's going to be angry throughout the entire anime, and he's going to be screaming off the top of his head, his lungs. So the question I asked earlier in the podcast about mythology being used to control the masses, or, you know, whatever. When I was reading Greek mythology, I felt like a lot of it controlled women. And I didn't know if you guys knew anything about that. I felt like, and then there were these rules for women, and then women, I felt like, created this god where they could go be promiscuous. There was a god of love for women where they could be promiscuous with each other too. This was years ago, so I just didn't know if you guys knew anything about that.
Greek society was not big on female rights.
It wasn't. I didn't know that. I would have thought they would be. They
were not. Yeah, there is kind of an undercurrent in Greek mythology that kind of suggests that there was maybe a older mythos that had more of a female bent to it, because I mean, you get the Amazons, for instance, and I mean, and Athena, she was originally a goddess of war, and sort of morphed into more of a goddess of wisdom, which is kind of an odd mix. But
that's where mythology always confused me. Like, the gods just have all these different things that they were the god of, you know, instead of just
Greek
one.
Yeah, Greek mythology is really big on that, especially the sun god. You've got Helios, which is the original Titan sun god, and then you've got Apollo, who's sort of a sun god and the god of light, and he's also the god of music and something else, art maybe. I can't remember now.
That's a perfect example of sort of humans creating gods to fill their needs. Because if the Greek culture wasn't so big on music, there wouldn't be a god of music. I don't know if there is a Norse god of music or not. There may be, but it's not like he's super popular or she's super popular.
I don't think there is a Norse god of music.
I don't think there's a Norse god of the sun either.
Actually, Balder might fit in that Norse god of the sun, because he's the god of light. It's sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of.
But you can see sort of how society and culture, but also geographical location, shaped the mythologies. Because you're not going to have the god of the desert in Norse mythology. You're not going to have the god of ice and snow in African culture. You're not going to have the god of wine in Mexican culture. You're not going to have the god of cows and sheep in Japanese culture, because there was, you know, so it's interesting how it's pretty visible that human need and society and government and culture shaped these mythologies. And then, of course, it gets you questioning how much they shaped religion as well. And that's an interesting topic that we definitely don't have time to discuss today.
Interesting. Yeah, I always love talking about religion. So in closing on the topic, is there anything else we want to talk about? How mythology came about. I'm a big fan of the idea that mythology came about. So we have two big things: fear-based and also needing to explain phenomenons and stuff like. Is it phenomena or phenomenons? Phenomena. Anything else we want to talk about before closing and getting to the reading?
Well, basically what you're saying that there's two, it really comes down to just one, because when you're afraid of something, you want to rationalize it.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
You've got to understand it. So this fear-based thing is, okay, I'm terrified of this force of nature, this force, this unexplainable thing that just killed my son or destroyed my house or burned down my village. What the hell is going on? Okay, it's a god that I can appease by all of a sudden the fear is gone. So it's this need to explain things to alleviate fear.
Yeah, explanations make things seem more familiar too. Because I mean, if you can say, well, the lightning came down because the god sent it. Okay, so next time we won't piss off the god.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a pretty interesting, exploring early mythology is an interesting experiment in early human psychology in a way, because it shows you what people were afraid of, what they wanted, what they looked for in their society, or the things that they aspired to do. They put all of that into their gods. And that shows you where the culture's at. The Norse culture, for example, is much more war-based, whereas the Greek culture has a lot more culture and beauty and art and music and love and emotions and all of that. So it's really interesting to see where these people were at in their psychological journey, let's say, as a culture, based on their mythology.
Interesting. Man, I had something to say. Okay, so we should probably get to the reading now.
Definitely.
And okay, so Anita, what we usually do is we have the author give us the parts, kind of like giving us roles for a script. And you're more than welcome to narrate, take a part, whatever you want. I'm actually excellent at doing a female voice.
So, yeah. Well, I don't have any females, I think, in the scene I sent. That was the chapter 3, right?
Yeah.
We'll make one. That's the joke you laugh at?
I would have given you a female part, but most of the female scenes are at the end of the book, and they have some spoilery stuff in them.
Yeah, we don't want any of that.
Because the ship doesn't actually have any female crew. I mean, the world has female sailors, but my crew doesn't. My ship doesn't have it at this point. But anyway,
there was actually a time when it was believed that women on ship were bad luck.
Yeah, I know, but I just decided to chuck that. I've never kind of liked that superstition. So when I was writing the book, I said, well, the heck with it. I mean, I figured it when I was writing it, I just women sailors. Like, there is a woman sailor in the book, but she's a bad guy.
Ooh, the world needs more female villains.
Totally agree. Totally.
I love writing female villains. Anyway, and well, actually, the villain in this book, one of the villains is a female. She's the crazy moon goddess. Anyway, and but the captain in the she meets a very bad end.
That's
but she doesn't die.
Spoilery. Oh.
Well, nobody actually dies in this series.
They're all already dead.
Well, yeah, some of them are, but I mean, even the people who die don't necessarily end up dead because they stick around.
Sounds like Dragon Ball Z. I don't know if you guys know what that is.
Well, it's kind of the side effect of having ghosts in the world. So
definitely.
Anyway, so okay, Andy can be Captain Morrow.
I want to be Captain No, just kidding.
I thought you'd make a good. What?
Can I do a pirate accent, or do I need to do like a more refined accent?
Well, you can do a pirate accent. He's kind of a rogue. He's more of a swashbuckler than a pirate.
Done.
Oh, I love swashbucklers. In my opinion, they're the more romantic pirate.
They are a romanticized version of a pirate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I figured Stevie can do the other crew, like, because there's several crew members. There's One-Eyed Anders and Mouse. Mouse is a very young, sort of shy character, so I thought it would be good for him.
Okay, Mouse and One-Eyed Anders. Okay.
And there's Striker Angus is there as well. But most of these just like have
I'll
like
do
one
Striker
line.
Angus. I'll do Striker Angus.
Okay. And are you just going to narrate for us?
He's sort of the kind of the brushed Scottish. One-Eyed Anders is my Viking. Mouse is the timid, shy crew member, and there's one more character at the end, I think.
Wait, One-Eyed Anders is the Viking?
Yeah.
Andy, do you want to do the Viking?
I don't actually know the Viking accent.
Oh, okay. Well,
he doesn't have to have a Viking accent. He just has to have a Viking attitude.
Okay, I'll do that one. I'll be manly this time. Okay, One-Eyed Anders and Mouse.
Yeah.
For me. Okay.
Okay, and I'm just trying to see if I got Pinky Jasper.
These names.
I love it. I love that feeling of names, the sort of names that you get
Wonderful.
on a sailor or
Short
a
Davy.
crew.
Okay, who wants to be Short Davy? He's just an ordinary sailor.
Are you pointing at me?
I feel like you fit the bill better.
Hey, thank you, Andy. You're being mean today.
Hey, Short Davy has a good singing voice. Don't knock him.
Yep, that's me. That was actually not bad. I thought I was trying to be funny, but now I'm thinking I might go on American Idol.
Okay, and we have the rescued sailor as well.
So many characters. Okay, this is gonna be fun. So many characters.
I think that's it. I don't see Pinky Jasper here anywhere.
Pinky Jaspers. Andy, from now on, I'm Pinky Jasper. All right.
Well, if Pinky Jasper shows up, you can do this. Okay, so I'll narrate here, I guess.
Okay, sounds good.
So are we starting?
Yes.
Okay. As the celestial jewel sailed with all haste back into open waters, the sea spread calmer with a touch of undulating wildness, which reflected like black glass. The crisp air hit the crew with the force of a wench's slap. The smell of briny seaweed, fish, and death clung to it. Captain Morrow sighed and tossed a command to the men at the rail on watch duty.
Keep a sharp eye on the waves. By all accounts and indications, they'll be salvaged tonight.
Answering hails echoed off the timbers, a sad agreement from the crew of what may come. The ship veered west, and then to a more southern course, following the strains of moonlight, searching. The dark, unfathomable waves slapped against the ship as the spotters leaned over the rail and peered across the depths. Radiance and chimera spun in their vision. Nevertheless, their eyes faithfully scanned the ocean for life or death. Suddenly, a smallish voice squeaked.
Something in the water.
Mouse raised a hand, pointing into the illuminated black.
Looks like debris.
The boy's right, sir.
The familiar baritone of Striker Angus shouted.
Wood to be sure, and white cloth. Could be a sail.
It don't mean a ship was lost.
One-Eyed Anders roared, voicing everyone's thought out loud.
Don't mean that. Could be they was caught, same as us. Just some damage. Could even be from the bastion.
No.
The captain's soft answer washed over the crew.
We shouldn't speculate until we're certain. It's bad luck, that.
Still, the crew grew silent. No laughter, no banter, only their duties to man the ship and all available eyes on the sea. Despite clinging hope, the further out they sailed, the more shouts came as they spotted debris. Fragments of wood and sailcloth, bits and bobs of individual possessions. The unmistakable flotsam of a shipwreck. Then Rafe asked the question on the tip of every tongue.
Any sign of crew?
The indistinct silence gave him an unwelcome answer.
Perhaps.
A screech broke past his words as if sensing the unease. A dreadful cry somewhere in the distance. The shout of
monsters
went up towards the sky. A brash gust of wind caught the sail and the ship gained sudden momentum, cutting through the choppy waves. Spray bounced from its sides, and the crew bounded from their languor, spoiling for a fight. All hands made to man the ship's weapons, be it cannon, harpoon, sword, knife, billy club, or belaying pins. With all nerves and tension slicing through the ship, Short Davy cried,
"In the water! Hard about left! Afloat with monsters coming up fast!"
The captain whirled, spyglass at the ready. Sure enough, the sea churned in the wake of beasts.
It's a pack of wolf eels, my lads. Get the harpoons primed and ring that damnable bell. We've got a soul to rescue.
The crew scrambled to ready the silver-laced harpoons and their cannons, while Quiet Peter grabbed the bell pull and clanged with all his might. The magic fused into the metal, surged across the ship and far out into the sea. Shivers cracked the air like an invisible whip, and every bone oscillated in the wake of the repeated peals of the bell. The poor wretch in the water convulsed and glowed, and the wolf eel screamed.
Now, lads, the harpoons!
Sharp-tipped iron and silver sliced the air, and the 3 harpoons landed true to their targets, smacking hard with the thud of metal in flesh and the swoosh of bloody spray. In one last screech to curse the dead, the beast shattered, exploding into magic and meat. More eels swarmed, teeth gnashing, bubbling screams snaking through the water as the desperate sailor thrashed and flailed in the sea. Rafe yelled.
Another volley!
And more harpoons sang through the air, slashing their targets. The ocean swirled in a bloody mess until the remainder of the pack retreated. From the quarterdeck, standing proud and the wind blowing his coattails, Rafe shouted,
Come alongside and cast the net before they try again.
Aye, Captain,
came the reply from Anders. The ship banked and maneuvered parallel to the sailor. A net of star-woven rope was fired from the ship, another staunch aim. It scooped what lingered of the floating sailor and hauled him aboard, the crank and tackle clanking slowly above the man's screams. Cast from the netting, dripping seawater, the fellow flopped about on deck like a prize fish.
Are there any more?
Even above the wind, the captain's voice rang like a temple bell.
No, Captain, that be it. Don't see another one in the water nowhere.
Full ahead, then. Keep searching.
As the ship sailed on, scouring the waters, Rafe turned his attention to their catch, bounding down to the main deck. Soaked and terrified, the sailor scrambled on all fours like a crab, swirling around in circles.
Get away! Get away!
The man's screams hit the deck like the dead weight of a drunken mariner.
I need to get away! Take hold of yourself, sailor!
The voice of crew gunner Striker Angus snapped the night air, followed by the back of his hand against the man's cheek.
You ain't in the water no more.
The shock of the blow and the words quieted his movement as he curled into a seated position, but did not silence his raving.
Not in the water? Are they gone? Please tell me they're gone. They were all around, all fins and teeth swimming through the sea. I could hear them. Oh, by the gods, I could hear them. They were eating.
He shuddered and became quiet. Rafe softly smiled, belying the sadness in his eyes, and spoke in a gentle, reassuring voice.
It's over, sailor. On this ship, you're safe from the monsters.
The rescued seafarer looked up, his body shaking.
I'm alive, then? I survived?
No, lad. Oh, sorry.
The captain. No, lad. I'm sorry. You're dead. You drowned. Went down with your ship. All that's left is your remnant, your spirit. That's what we pulled from the ocean.
The man twitched at the captain's blunt words, his head rocking back and forth.
No, you lie. I'm here, on a ship.
He knocked his fist against the deck.
See, solid, alive. I survived. I can't be dead.
Rafe sighed.
Best you face it quick, sailor. Dead or alive on this ship, it's all the same. You're dead, and your body will soon feed the sea creatures.
No. I can't. I have to.
His words trailed off into a whisper as he stared into the quiet, daunting face of Captain Morrow.
How can I be dead? I don't want to be dead. No one does. But at least we retrieved your soul from being eaten by the wolf eels. A fate far worse than death.
Rafe extended his hand to the man who sat dribbling water on the deck, trembling, his mouth agape.
Welcome aboard the Celestial Jewel, a ship of sanctuary for the lost. I'm Captain Rafe Morrow, God of Souls.
What a great pirate scene this was. It's so classic. That's what I felt. It was classic. And I'm stealing this idea for a D&D session. My favorite, I actually highlighted the sentence that I thought was really well written. More eels swarmed, teeth gnashing, bubbling screams snaking through the water as the desperate sailor thrashed and flailed in the sea. I don't know, it just stuck out to me. And I really, really thought that was a cool sentence you came up with there, Anita.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. So that was the reading. Excellent. It was a lot of fun. And by the way, there were so many characters. I think we just did a great job. So I'm just giving myself I did better in that than I thought I was going to do. Did y'all like my short Davy?
Yeah, I liked Andy's.
Awesome.
I liked Andy's version of the rescued sailor, who's Hugh, by the way. He sort of got him spot on because he's kind of a he's not a whiny character, but he's really kind of a pain.
That's just
and I
Andy.
think that kind of came through. That's not what I meant.
Thank you.
He called me short. Teacher. Yeah, and you know what? And you also wrote the guy's dialogue very well. I like how he's touching the ships, like, see, solid, alive. I love that. It was excellent.
Yeah.
Very human.
Very human.
Yeah. The ghosts on the ship are actually corporeal. When they're not on the ship, they're not. It's kind of a weird thing. Anyway, but
makes total sense. It's fantasy. You can totally totally
well, the ship
explain
is magic. The ship was actually created in the afterworld. So it's like part of the afterworld. So any ghosts on the ship can appear and act like they were human, normal.
Very cool.
Well, that we are getting to a close on our podcast. Anita, where can people find you? I see that you also have a Patreon.
Yeah, I've got a Patreon page, and I have a website, Welcome to Avalon. I'm also over on Twitter, Scribe77, and I have a Facebook group, AF Stewart's Minions, which is where I'm mostly.
Welcome to Avalon. Okay, awesome. All right, is there anything else in closing? Andy, who do we have for next week? Do you know?
Next week we've got Shakira Dunn.
Shakira Dunn.
She's a younger author, I believe.
A what?
Younger.
Shakira Dunn. How come I haven't heard of her? Usually if... don't look up... Never mind. So, my bad. This isn't my computer, so if it gets any viruses... Oh, well. All right. So that has been this week's episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We hope you, like I, learned a whole lot about mythology. And Anita, you are just an all-around fascinating person. I also like ghost stories and stuff like that. So it's been a great honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. It was a very good pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, my name is Stevie Collier. I'm here with my co-host, Andy Peliquin. Thank you again. And that's A.F. Stewart. Look her up on Amazon and grab her book. The second book is on its way, so no worries. This is the Fantasy Fiends podcast. We love you all. You're amazing. Have a great night. Good night.
Bye.